Welcome back, listeners, to the Tron podcast, The Randomness of Nothing. This is your host, Rashad Woods, and I really appreciate the time of the gentleman who had a chance to carve out of his busy schedule today, Mr. Scott Maderer, life coach, very successful entrepreneur, and now uses his message to inspire others to reach a better version of themselves. I want to thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate you carving out some time this morning.
Like I said, the feeling is mutual from the great state of Texas. Thank you. So I got a chance, obviously, to look up your history, your background, your story. And I always get inspired by people who are successful, who didn't necessarily come from, the pinnacle of it and work their way up, because that's what this show is all about. And you obviously told your story as a teacher, kind of the winding road that you drove down to once you turn the corner and your mindset, you started to help others.
Absolutely. So what happened is, back in the day, like you mentioned, I was a school teacher. I did that for 16 years. Mm-hmm. I taught science. I actually went to school for medical research and did that for a little while. Figured out that medical research was chasing grant money all the time, and I really didn't want to chase grant money all the time. So I pivoted and became a school teacher. Mm-hmm. Loved pouring into the kids, loved working with the students, not just the content. It's really about the interactions and the relationships you build and, talking to them about what they want to be when they grow up and all of that sort of stuff. That's the real value as a teacher. That's the part that jazzes you. Mm-hmm. But as you mentioned, my wife and I had a great deal of debt actually at that time. And I was, because of that, I was suicidal because of the debt.
Oh, goodness.
We weren't communicating. I would drive home late at night. I was planning my own suicide to drive off the road and make it appear like I fell asleep.
That's horrible.
And I listened to talk radio to keep me up, to keep me awake. The irony of that is I was listening to talk radio to keep me awake so that I could pretend like I fell asleep. It's like, but
I didn't want to laugh, but it just like the way that came out.
Yeah. There's part of you that doesn't want to give up. And then there's part of you that does, especially when you deal with depression and clinical depression, which I have.
Sure.
My wife and I were leading to divorce. We weren't communicating. We weren't really fighting, but we weren't talking. I was going to protect her and shield her from the reality of our situation, even though my wife's a smart lady. She knew the reality of the situation, but she was going to protect me and not add to my stress. So we just kind of were drawing apart. And eventually they changed the lineup on talk radio, and I started hearing messages actually from the Dave Ramsey show about getting out of debt and looking at things different. And somebody came on that had a story that was similar enough to mine, and they were talking about they were doing their debt-free scream, and they were talking about getting out of debt. And I realized that for the last week when I was listening to that show, instead of thinking about suicide, I was actually angry with the show and like arguing with the radio, about how stupid this message was. And then when I heard that one that was kind of close to me, and part of what he said is the first step was coming clean with his wife and, getting on the same page with her.
Yeah.
And I kind of had this attitude of, well, I'm either going to turn it around or we're not. So let me go talk to my wife. And turns out she was listening to the same show in the day, and I was listening to the rebroadcast at night. We didn't know that, but God had put it in both of our lives to listen to it. We kind of looked at each other and went, okay, it's now or never. We're going to do it. We completely changed the way we were living. And I mean, radically changed the way we were living. We got on the same page. We started communicating. I got some mental health. In all of that, I had a couple of emergency surgeries, changed careers, and went into the corporate world. Did that for 11 years. All of that happened kind of in the midst of this journey. And we paid off. When we started, we had about $60,000 in debt. We actually paid off $78,842. No, $854.42. Sorry, I almost transposed my numbers.
Wow.
But because of the emergency surgery, we ended up having all of that expense and all of those other things.
Right.
So when we were living so different, people just started coming up to us and going, y'all are kind of weird. Could you kind of help us figure out how to be weird? And we started helping people as a ministry and kind of doing it for free. Yeah. And then eventually some people started saying, we should pay you for this.
Oh my.
And started, insisting on giving us money. And I realized, this is a business. And so
beautiful.
I had just climbed the corporate ladder and got up to a really senior position and basically decided I wanted to launch the coaching business and started growing that, and then reversed my climb up the corporate ladder and kind of went back down the corporate ladder while my coaching business took off. And then since 2017, I've been doing that full time, worked with over 1,000 clients in 20 countries, 38 states.
Wonderful
and,
work.
Continue to do that now. My commute's really good. I walk about 30 seconds. That's the coffee pot's real close, and it's good. It's good coffee. It's not the coffee you get in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine the no stop signs, red lights, and getting on and off the freeways. You don't miss that one bit.
Yeah,
that's
not
awesome.
at all.
So what I thought was fascinating, and I was listening to some of your podcasts, is that you said the difference between somebody's career and somebody's calling, and and those are two distinct things. And for people who are on this show, can you please explain that?
Sure. So that's one of the things I talk about a lot. It's actually, I go into this a little bit in the book, Inspired Living, that I wrote as well, that I think a lot of times we confuse the two. People think of their calling as what they do for a living. And the truth is the words that we use in the English language, we treat them interchangeably, and that's career and vocation. But they actually mean completely different things. They come from completely different roots. The word career comes from a word that at its base means cart, something that gets you from point A to point B. If you think about it, that's what you get paid for. It's the engine to drive activity forward. Correct. That's what money is. It's just a tool. Money's not a thing other than we can use it to do other things.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so, that could be spend, that could be save, that could be give. That's all sorts of activities. But the money is the engine. And to get that money, we usually have a career or an activity. On the other hand, vocation literally comes from the root word for vocalization or vocal. Vocalis is the word, which means to be called.
Correct.
And if you think about that, first off, to be called means there's a caller and a callee.
Right.
Now, I'm a faithful person. In my background, I consider that caller to be God, but I don't care what name you want to give it.
Right.
It could be the way you're wired. It could be the universe. It could be God. I don't call it Bob. I don't care. Whatever it is, there is something that you are designed and built and uniquely made to do.
Correct.
There are things that drive you, and that purpose or passion or what I would call calling weaves throughout your life. So the truth is your calling should show up in not just what you do in terms of your career, but how you do it.
For sure.
It's the how and the why behind the what.
For sure.
So it's the things that drive you and make you show up as a father a certain way. They make you show up as a husband a certain way. They make you show up, wherever as a volunteer.
Right.
They make you show up in how you watch Netflix, whatever it is, your calling kind of weaves throughout all of that and is a deeper purpose. And when you realize that, it keeps you from getting into that situation where you're always looking for the perfect thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you recognize, wait, the perfect thing comes out of the why, not the what.
Right.
And so you start being and not just doing.
Well, I thought it was important that you said, too, when you had mentioned in one of your previous podcasts that the difference between I don't have time for that versus that's not a priority. And, when I'm listening to it, and you mentioned like one of the examples was like, I don't have time for my daughter's soccer game versus my daughter's soccer game is not a priority. I mean, you sound like the real father of the year talk right there, right? You know what I mean? So like when you actually start saying things like that, you start to realize what's a baseline of what you can't go past versus what you need to let go.
Right.
And so
where's the line for you?
Correct. And it's small things like that. I mean, even if you're having a conversation, with somebody, you're like, that's not a priority. And then they'll start to even process that thought as opposed to in a rude way, I don't have time for that. There's two distinct ways you can formulate that conversation with somebody.
Well, and it even lets you like let's say you're in an employment situation and your boss has given you too much to do. Not that ever happens to anyone, right?
Right.
You've got 72 things on your list and you've only got time to do, 68 of them, kind of thing. It allows you to go in and have a conversation. And instead of telling your boss, I don't have time to get all of this done. And the kind of natural response to that is either work harder, work faster, or, do more. That's kind of the pushback on it.
Of course.
You can literally say, okay, this is what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Help me prioritize this list and tell me what's the most important things, because I may not be able to get to all of this in a day.
Right.
So what's first, what's second, what's third, what's fourth? So I make sure, hey, boss, I get done the things that you really want me to do. And I don't spend time on stuff that at the end of the day, you're looking at going, well, that doesn't matter if it gets done today or not. And, I have to know. You're right. Changing your language from a time-based language to a priority-based language helps you look at things different and helps other people look at things different too.
Well, I thought it was important too when you were also giving those examples where you said like just because somebody's the best sales lead, they don't necessarily make the best sales manager. We've
two different sets of skills.
We've seen it in sports, right? Like like team sports in particular. The best, diva wide receiver is not the lead of the team, right? Like, it's like, listen, hey, man, the guy is phenomenal athlete, one of a kind, world class. He can't be the guy in the locker room giving instructions on how to lead. Can't do it.
No.
Right.
Yeah. It's leading, and leadership is its own set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we promote someone based off of their technical knowledge, their ability to do the work, that doesn't necessarily mean they have the right skill set to, to motivate, to engage, to educate, to lead other people. Now, they might, it does happen. There are people that get promoted and because they have technical knowledge and learn or develop or grow. And there are companies that do a good job of teaching those skills before they promote people or engaging people.
For sure.
But there's a ton more exceptions to that than there are examples of that. And that's where the Peter principle comes in. We all talk about somebody is promoted to the level of their incompetence is what the principle says. Because you think about it. Because if they're good, okay, give them another step. Oh, they're still good. Okay, give them another step. Oh, they're not good anymore. Now they're there. That's it. That's as high as they can go.
For sure.
And of course, what ended up happening then is you promoted someone to a position where they're actually not good at it. You took them out of their gifting and put them into something where they're not. That's not good for them. That's not good for the company. That's not good for anyone.
Right.
And yet we don't do it the right way, which is say, hey, wait, we're not looking for the same set of skills if we're going to this level. Maybe it's a different set of skills. How do we identify the people that have those skills and then train them, encourage them, develop them so that then when they step into the role, they're ready to go?
Well, I thought it was important, too, that sometimes you have to be almost, obviously you've ran your own businesses and you've been very successful and you've helped other people. And I'm sure you've ran into entrepreneurs who tried to do everything.
Absolutely.
But it's no different than, and again, I bring up sports. I'm no world-class athlete myself, far from it. But at some point, you have to play your position, right? You have to play, there's a reason why there's skill positions in a team sport. There's a reason why, and I always come back to martial arts. I've done karate, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai. There are certain things inherently that I am just better at. And knowing in business or in your entrepreneur or when you launching whatever you are off the ground, at some point you're not great at everything.
Right.
And that's just a fact.
And a lot of folks go into entrepreneurship, because they see what's wrong where they're at or they think they do. They're not always right, but they think they do.
Absolutely.
And usually they have some technical gifting. They're good at the job. And then they go into business, and a lot of times what they do is end up creating a job for themselves where they actually work harder, work longer, make less. And it's like, wait a minute, I went into this because I wanted freedom and I wanted to be able to get everything, to be done right. And, and that hasn't happened. And then they're frustrated or they fail. They go out of business. Most small businesses go out of business. They say something like 85% in the first 3 years.
Correct.
Why? Well, a lot of times it's because that guy or that gal kind of, again, they promoted themselves, but they put themselves in a position where they don't yet have that skill set to do those things. Now, obviously, when you first start out, a lot of times, yes, it is, me, myself, and I'm wearing all of the hats. But even there, you have to think about where am I spending my time? And am I spending enough of my time on the things that only I can do?
Correct.
And, so for example, one of the things business owners do is create a list with 4 columns. And the first column is the stuff I need to be the one that does, and I love doing it. Right. Okay. It's my job as the leader and the owner and the starter of the company to do this.
For sure.
And it needs to be me.
Right.
The second column is I love doing this, but it doesn't need to be me. Right. Okay.
Yes.
The third column is I don't love doing this, and it is supposed to be me. And the fourth column is I don't love doing this, and it isn't supposed to be me.
For sure.
Now, obviously, that fourth column, most owners have no problem giving that column up. I don't want to do it, and I don't need to do it. Dude, I'm hiring someone to do it.
For sure.
It's that column that's the I love to do it, but it doesn't need to be me that usually throws them for a loop.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And the column where I don't like to do this, but it needs to be me. So that one they put off and never do. And the other one they hold on to and never let go of. And both of those are a problem because really and truly, you should only be spending your time on the things that you need to be the one that does, that are your job. And all too often we get distracted by the stuff that we enjoy that isn't necessarily.
But aren't you having isn't the flip side to it that people could have like a Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady situation where, next thing you know, the backup quarterback, and I love Drew Bledsoe. I had a jersey of him as a kid, and he deserves to be, I think, in the Hall of Fame for what he accomplished. But, Tom Brady obviously did what he did. Do people have this situation where like, hey, man, my backup quarterback I need to keep him here so that way he doesn't exceed or she doesn't exceed what I'm doing. Like there's a little bit of ego and pride involved at the same time.
And that happens to business owners. That happens in a corporate environment. You see leaders that want to hold down upcoming leaders because they're going to show them up or make them look like they don't know what they're doing. And by the way, sometimes that's even true, But
I read the 48 Laws of Power, never outshine the master.
Yeah. But the truth is, as a true leader, you don't have to be the person that has all the answers. Right. You don't have to be the person. You need to be the person that knows how to ask good questions and then knows how to put people in positions where they can help you succeed and reward them for that. Right. So but it's a different frame. It's a different way of looking at it. And you have to get over your own pride and your own arrogance. And let's face it, most of us are prideful and arrogant. That's part of what you need to be sometimes to go into. Think about it. Going into business for yourself. I mean, Absolutely. You're crazy. Yeah. And you got to be there. There's a certain amount of I can do this that you've got to have, or else you would never start the business.
Absolutely.
Same thing in a corporate environment. If you're that person that is you're not the positional leader, but you're a leader.
Exactly.
And everyone else is looking to you. Some people will see that as a threat, and some people will see that as what can I do? So like, for instance, when I was in corporate, my joke was the way I got promoted a lot, a relatively short amount of time. And in that company, that was really weird to the extent that like other leaders were like, how are you getting promoted so fast? And I'm like, well, I keep replacing myself. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I make sure I figure out somebody who can do the job that I'm doing better than me.
Right.
I train them, develop them, and get them to do it. And now it's like, hey, what do y'all need me to do now?
Exactly.
And they're like, well, we'll promote you.
Right.
And, because you replaced yourself, and it's like, I keep replacing myself.
A lot of people won't do that.
That's different. It's a different way of looking at it. But it works.
Delegating is one of the most difficult things that I think, I obviously I'm not equating functioning adults with small children, but anybody who's had children, it's like you hear your kid, I can do that. And you're so used to actually doing it for them that you start seeing the anger boiling over in your kid, right? When they are like, no, I'm doing this. And you're like, okay, I'll watch. And then after a while, it starts to become, you don't even pay attention. I don't want to say pay attention. You know it's going to be done, and you just do the proper follow-up to make sure that it's actually been done.
Mm-hmm.
It's letting go, I think, is one of the hardest things in general that people have.
Well, and a lot of that is self-created too, because what we'll do is we don't actually delegate, we dump. Or we direct. So dumping is, hey, get this done.
Absolutely.
No clarity, no direction, no standard operating procedure, no expectation, no nothing. There's no information around it. And different people need different amounts of information, but everyone needs some level of information,
Not asking
and
much.
we don't give it to them at all. That's dumping.
Right.
And then they fail, and we're like, see, I just need to do it myself.
Yep.
Well, yeah, you created that.
Correct.
And, the other way we do it is we direct. And that's where we tell them the expectations. We tell them what they need to do. We tell them what it should look like. But then we basically micromanage everything about how they do it. Mm-hmm. It's so, for instance, instead of looking at it and saying, here's the target, here's the end result, or here's the standard process. But then that person can kind of have a little bit of deviation, a little bit of freedom, a little bit of flexibility, because it's the stuff that doesn't matter. I've had people that are like, no, the spreadsheet that you produce, it's like the second column needs to be green and the third column needs to be pink. And it's like, why does it need to be green and pink? And there's no reason other than that's their habit.
Yep.
If there's a reason, if somebody is looking at it and going, I'm looking for the green column, okay, that's different.
Right.
But if it's just green because you like the color green,
what are we talking about?
Then why micromanage that? Why
exactly.
Why develop that? And so people push back against that. And so both of those are incorrect delegating that then creates the gap that causes us to go, well, see, nobody else can do it. It's got to be me. It's like, no, you're lying to yourself. Somebody else can do it. You're just not doing it right.
Well, it's also, I watch a lot of Discovery Channel, History Channel, and you'll always say, for people who know how the Dorito got got created, right? It was a salesman, and you're from Texas, so I'm sure you know the story. He saw the Mexican restaurant that was, hey, we didn't throw away the tortillas. We were frying them, and then we're creating these separate chips. And then he's like, hold on a minute. This is local. This can go national. Do you ever find it? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the person that created the idea wasn't that VP, wasn't that senior leader. And now you're just the outside sales rep. And then because it didn't come from this particular segment or group of people, you're not the smart people and you're not in the inner circle, so to speak. So we're going to brush your idea off to the side.
Yeah, it happens all the time. People are blind to certain things. We all have our biases. We all have our own cognitive blocks that keep us from seeing everything. And the first step is being aware of the fact that you have them. Because a lot of us are blind to the fact that we have blind spots,
Yes.
Right.
And
it's like, that's even worse because now you're blind to things and you don't think you are, and that's sort of that arrogance again. But when you realize that, hey, I've got blind spots, well, now all of a sudden you start looking to your team to go, y'all can help me make sure I don't miss stuff. You can challenge my thinking. You can bring a new idea. You can do all of that. It's not a threat. It's a way of growing all of us, of helping all of us succeed. But, but again, some of that comes down to company culture and how, it starts from leadership because leadership creates culture. And because that's the difference between what we say and what we actually are. So we all know that almost every company out there has some sort of highfalutin mission and vision statement that sounds beautiful.
Of course.
But is it real? And the only way to know if it's real is you got to go talk to the line employees. It's like, if they say we love our employees and we support them, but then people can't get PTO when they need it. Well, then no, you don't. You say you do, you're giving lip service to it, but the reality is something different. And when there's that incongruent nature between what we say we are and what we are, people don't succeed in that environment.
For sure.
And honestly don't stay very long in that environment because I would tell you this, if you've got a high turnover rate, you are incongruent somewhere between the message that leadership is giving and the reality that people are living. And you need to figure out where it is.
Well, one thing that I know, and obviously I want to pivot to your coaching career and what you do for a profession, you have a lot of inspiring words, is a lot of things that people say, whether they don't have time, whether they don't have resources, it's because you're not prioritizing and you're not making it. It's about you. It's, you're the root cause of it all, so to speak. So can you dive into that and then just talk about your coaching career as a whole?
Yeah. So what I tell people I do is I'm a stewardship coach. I help you master your time, your talents, and your treasures so that you can live out your calling. And about 98% of the people that come to me will tell me that they either have a problem of money or time. I don't have enough time or I don't have enough money to do fill in the blank. Right. It may be starting a business. It may be, my wife and I we can't put the kids in private school. It may even be, we're not communicating well together because all we do about money is fight. Or maybe we just don't talk about money like my wife and I, but it's there's a block around our time or around our money. We've talked a lot about time. So that's what I'm kind of highlighting money. The truth is all I ever work on, and I think this is what you're alluding to, is talent. Because it's never about how much time or how much money you have. It's about how you manage those resources.
Correct.
And to manage those resources, the only thing you can really manage is you.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have control over anything else.
You don't.
It's like you don't have control over whether your kid gets sick on Friday. You don't have control whether you get hired or fired. Whether that's as a small business owner and a particular client or whether that's as a W-2 employee. By the way, even if you're the CEO, you don't have complete control over whether you get hired or fired.
You get enough people on the board who asked you out,
Absolutely. So there are things that you just don't have control over, but the one thing you do have control over is your attitude, your thoughts, your behavior, your actions, you. And so when you start looking at it that way, it's kind of one of those, hey, guess what? You're your own worst enemy. You're the problem.
For sure.
But here's the cool thing. You're also the solution.
Absolutely.
You're also the biggest ally.
Right.
You're also the one thing that you can work on from which everything else spins. Right. And when you realize that, then all of a sudden they start, working on their money, for instance, or working on their time and their productivity, and they start getting that done. And real quickly, it's like, okay, I can do this. And then 6 months go by or 8 months go by, and they look up and they're like, I'm losing weight. Why am I losing weight?
It's so funny you mentioned that. Because
we're not talking about dieting. Why am I losing weight? It's like, well, you got disciplined in one area of your life and it spills over and starts making you pay attention in other areas of your life. All of a sudden you're exercising a little bit more. All of a sudden you're eating a little bit better.
Right.
Not because you ever set out to do that.
Right.
It's just a natural consequence. Same thing happens in reverse. I know people that start getting physically fit, and all of a sudden it's like, now I'm getting more disciplined in my money. It's like, yeah, because they're keystone habits and they spill over into all parts of your life.
For sure.
And so when folks are struggling in those areas, a lot of times what they don't realize is it's holding them back in a lot of other areas that they don't even realize are being affected.
Well, I think it's very important to mitigate and to knock out excuses. It's almost like the verbiage of you're better letting it go than letting it linger, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes the best things you can do is just like, you let it go. And so, it's funny you mentioned the diet thing, because I had a very good guest on here a few weeks ago who was a chef. And I said, I always thought I was in really good shape because I was active. I did martial arts. I was at the gym. And then, somebody took a video of me and a partner doing jujitsu together. And I just see this blob, right? And this is not too long ago, right? Like it's like a year and a half ago, like 16 months ago. And all of a sudden I was like, dude, what the heck? I'm working out. But I was active, but I wasn't disciplined. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a difference between the two. And then once I cleaned up what I was eating, once I started watching my diet, and I'm not perfect, but the weight just started naturally shedding off when I made a concerted effort to be disciplined, not just active or just going to martial arts and working out, because there were two distinct differences. And you can fool yourself and lie to yourself. It's
the analogy on money is, I'm going to solve my problem. I'm just going to go earn more money. It's like, guess what? You cannot out earn your own stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
And your own bad behavior. You can't. If the root cause is behavior and mindset and thinking, and you add more money to it, you just start doing those behaviors with more zeros behind them.
Correct.
By the way, if your discipline and your mindset and your behaviors and are great, and I add more money, you start doing the right things with more zeros behind them.
Sure.
So it's not. The money isn't the problem or the solution. It's the magnifying glass, or it's the symptom that's showing you, hey, this is what I need to work on, the root problem underneath it.
That's a beautiful analogy and beautiful thought process. And it applies to all avenues of life too, whether it's like you said, parent,
time,
marriage,
money, parenting, marriage, communication,
unquestionable,
leadership.
Unquestionable.
It's all the same.
Absolutely. And so, I always ask this, and it's not because you need me to find out where you are, because obviously you're successful long before the show and continue to do so. But for the purpose of this show, where can people find Scott Maderer and his services and what you do?
So I actually put together a landing page just for your listeners. I do that for every show that I come on. I like to create something that has some free resources for folks.
That's a small landing page.
Some other tools, just a way of saying thank you for letting me come on the show. And hopefully if the leaders got it, or the listeners got anything out of it, they can find benefit from it.
For sure.
So you can find that if you go to my website, which is inspiredstewardship.com, and then just /T.R.O.N, just like in the podcast title.
Oh.
I just did that. No periods or anything, just the letters.
Right.
And what you'll find there's some free resources you can sign up for that they'll get delivered straight to you. There's a link there if you wanted to jump on a quick call, not so I can sell you anything, but just so I can talk to you about what's going on in your life and maybe give you some help.
Okay.
There's information about my book, Inspired Living, and my own podcast that you mentioned, the Inspired Stewardship podcast, all of that. And you can find that at inspiredstewardship.com /T.R.O.N, which I really want to make it Tron, by the way.
It's okay. I was trying to, I think one of the interesting things was just briefly about myself is I'm curious, right? And I was like, well, I watch documentaries, I watch, History, Discovery Channel. I like to see how things are made. I couldn't make anything from scratch to save my life. I mean, right? Like, full disclosure, making a cup of tea was a challenge for me. I'm doing and all you have to do is put the bag in hot waters. Creatorship was not my forte when it comes to tinkering in the garage or basement, so to speak. But I am curious. And so I decided to say it's the randomness of nothing, because I truly do have random facts and idiosyncrasies and things that I can just pop off the top of my head and read about. So it just kind of helped me to kind of cultivate that kind of show and get guests such as yourself.
Great mindset. I like that. Curiosity, I consider a superpower. So that's good.
I appreciate that. It's being a geek now is a lot more training than it was, 30 years ago. So it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, now being a nerd or a geek is actually trendy, so that it is funny.
Exactly. So, Scott Maderer, I want to appreciate you for your time, your stewardship, and your always thoughtfulness of others. And I appreciate you coming on the Tron podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it as well.
Thank you.